New Formula One cars create so much excitement. Anticipation builds at the start of each season as we wait to see who can unleash an exciting new design, unexpected innovations, the occasional new colour scheme, and every team has that renewed hope ahead of a fresh start. But all that hope can be wiped away in a matter of hours once the new cars hit the track. Teams and drivers keep their early thoughts to themselves in pre-season, but they almost always know in advance if they're in for a promising campaign or a year of struggle. Some bad cars are less surprising than others, so for this list we've dug out 10 times teams had high expectations that weren't met when it really counted. Number 10. Benetton B196, 1996. The B196 wasn't a terrible car, but it goes down as a disappointment because Benetton had won the previous 2 Drivers' Championships with Michael Schumacher, and in 1995 it won 11 out of 17 races en route to its first Constructors' Crown. To follow that season up with 0 wins was a huge step backwards. Those at Benetton at the time believed the 96 car was just as good as the all-conquering B195, and Schumacher has even said that he reckoned a 3rd World Championship was on the cards if he stayed. Ross Brawn believes Benetton should have won several races in 1996, and he puts the failure to pick up a single victory for the first time since 1988 down to the drivers and poor reliability, rather than the B196 being a bad car. Number 9. Mercedes MGP W01, 2010. Mercedes thought it had a golden, or should that be silver, ticket when it pounced on the opportunity to buy Brawn GP after the team had just won both World Championships in 2009. But while Mercedes got a good deal, it inherited a car for 2010 that was desperately underdeveloped. Brawn had struggled to keep up with the pace of the other top teams over the course of 2009 as the money got tight, and in making sure it got over the line with Jenson Button to win the World Championship, the following year's car received very little investment. So while Mercedes thought it was buying an off-the-shelf championship contender, there were those inside the team, including Ross Brawn himself, who knew 2010 was going to be difficult. What would have been the BGP 002 became the Mercedes MGP W01, and expectations spiralled even further out of control when Michael Schumacher was coaxed out of retirement to drive for the team. Mercedes was a low-key 4th in the championship, failing to win a race and only scoring 3 podiums, all of which came from Nico Rosberg. World Championships came later in the decade, but it would take significant investment in the years after 2010 to turn this into the powerhouse that has dominated F1 since 2014. Number 8. Ferrari 642 and 643, 1991. Alain Prost had narrowly missed out on the previous year's championship after another Suzuka collision with Ayrton Senna, but hopes were sky high at Ferrari heading into 1991. With McLaren introducing a new V12 engine, Williams getting to grips with a semi-automatic gearbox, and Benetton delaying the introduction of its new car, Ferrari believed its updated 1990 machine, the 642, would have the edge over the opposition. Despite Ferrari also having a fully blown 1991 car in the works for later in the year, Prost feared the team had been complacent over the winter, having delayed work on the 643 while trying to boost its 1990 title chances. The part redesigned 642 was no match for McLaren or Williams at the start of the year, and despite a promising debut for the 643 at the French Grand Prix, that was as good as it would get. Prost failed to win a race, finished a distant 5th in the championship, and was then fired before the season finale in Australia after falling out with Ferrari management. Perhaps the team did him a favour, because its 1992 car was even worse. Number 7. Lotus 100T, 1988. Lotus lost Ayrton Senna for 1988, but the arrival of reigning world champion Nelson Piquet meant there was no reason to expect this was the beginning of the end for such an iconic team. But the 100T chassis was a letdown. Despite using the same Honda engine that dominated the year in the back of the iconic McLaren MP4-4, Lotus's design compromised the performance of the Japanese unit, and the chassis wasn't up to the task of controlling the impressive power output. Piquet claimed 3 podiums, the last Lotus would score before closing at the end of 1994, and the team's points tally of 23 was a big step down from the 64 it scored in Senna's final season. In summary, the 100T was the car that sent Lotus heading for the doldrums. Number 6. Toyota TF102 2002. Toyota spent a year testing before entering F1 in 2002, but huge investment from Japan and a long lead time weren't enough to spare its blushes in its first season. It scored points on its debut in the Australian Grand Prix, but that was a fortunate result after the race start pile-up eliminated most of the field. Perhaps more telling was Mika Salo's failure to overtake Mark Webber's Minardi in their battle for 5th place, with the Finn spinning when attacking Webber 2 laps from the end. Toyota's only other point of the season came in round 3 at Interlagos, and as the year progressed it struggled to keep up in the development race. It was 10th in the standings in its first season, only finishing ahead of Arrows, which didn't complete a full campaign. Number 5. McLaren MP4-30 2015. McLaren was supposed to be heading back to the big time when it reunited with Honda 5 years ago. Instead, this was the beginning of a painful 3-year journey that would lead to an expensive separation. Honda joined F1's V6 hybrid engine era a year after its rivals, but it was woefully underprepared, struggling for power and reliability. McLaren did little to help its new partner, bragging about its size 0 packaging that gave Honda no slack whatsoever. As world champions Fernando Alonso and Jenson Button toiled near the back, McLaren claimed that the MP4-30 was a very good chassis being held back by a bad engine. Number 4. Williams FW26 2004. Williams fought Ferrari and McLaren for the World Championship in 2003, but its walrus-nosed FW26 failed to build on that the following season. The idea of the design was to remove any interference with the airflow around the front wing caused by the nose of the car, and Williams believed doing this would increase downforce and reduce drag. The team accepted the design was ugly, but the hope was it would be fast enough that everybody could look past the appearance. Unfortunately it wasn't, and the extra weight required to beef up the nose to pass the crash tests compromised any potential benefits. Patrick Head said he couldn't understand why nobody else had tried the design before, and after the Williams broke cover, several rival teams said they would be evaluating the concept. The speed of the Williams, and the fact that it never turned up elsewhere on the grid, would suggest that it wasn't as good an idea as first thought. Williams switched back to a more conventional nose for the Hungarian Grand Prix, adding 41 points in the final 6 races of the year to the 47 it scored across the first 12. Number 3. Honda RA107 2007. Over the final 6 races of 2006, Jenson Button outscored every other driver, prompting talk of a Honda title challenge in 2007. The RA107 turned heads at its launch, but that was because of its eye-catching sponsorless livery that featured a giant decal of planet Earth. The team said this was a bid to raise environmental awareness rather than a way to dodge the fact it no longer had a title sponsor. On track, the car was a disaster. It achieved that dreadful combination of being draggy on the straights but having no downforce in the corners, making it unpredictable to drive. Honda slumped from 4th to 8th in the championship, and its tally of 6 points put it only 2 ahead of its junior team Super Aguri, which was using Honda's 2006 car. Number 2. Ferrari F2005 2005. To follow up one of the greatest F1 cars of all time with one that shouldn't have won a race was a disaster. The F2005 was the car responsible for bringing to an end 5 years of dominance for Michael Schumacher. The disappointment of the F2005 was put down to Bridgestone failing to produce a suitable tyre when F1's rules changed to outlaw in-race tyre changes. Ferrari and Bridgestone had mastered the art of short-stint sprint racing in the early part of the 2000s, and this rule change undid all of that hard work. But there were other rule changes in 2005 that also affected Ferrari. New aero rules restricted the diffuser, forcing teams to generate more downforce from its central area. Ferrari's engine and gearbox design prevented it from opening up the diffuser as much as it would have liked in 2005, so another key part of the F2004's success was restricted the following season. Number 1. McLaren MP4-18 2003. Adrian Newey's radical MP4-18 looked like it was worth the wait when it was launched once the 2003 season was already up and running. The design was Newey's first attempt at a lot of the aerodynamic and packaging characteristics he would eventually master at Red Bull, but perhaps this McLaren was simply ahead of its time. The eye-catching tight bodywork around the rear caused reliability problems from the off, meaning the car could barely complete a lap or two without catching fire. McLaren also struggled to pass some of the crash tests, forcing it to add weight to the nimble-looking design. While word got out about the car's reliability problems, McLaren was adamant the MP4-18 was a big step up in performance from its predecessor, which in revised form was keeping Kimi Raikkonen in the championship hunt in 2003. But that wasn't the case. The car was slow and unpredictable to drive, and it suffered some huge accidents in testing. Newey discovered this was because of an aerodynamic imbalance, which he felt could be solved by a chassis redesign. However, he says he was outvoted in a meeting of McLaren's senior design personnel, who decided the car could be made to work in its original form. The MP4-18 is famous for being the car that never raced, but Newey claims it did. McLaren said the car was the mother of 2004's MP4-19, but Newey says the new car was just the 18 with a different sticker on it. As he predicted, the design was poor through the first part of 2004, and it was only when he finally got his wish to redesign it mid-season that McLaren found some performance.